This week, the 2020 Democratic field lost one candidate in Eric Swalwell, but it added another, billionaire liberal donor Tom Steyer. Steyer's entrance into the race was not without some backlash. Candidate Bernie Sanders said that while he likes Tom personally, his entrance raises some red flags.
I am a bit tired of seeing billionaires trying to buy political power. People are sick and tired of big money in politics. People want to overturn Citizens United. In my view, we've got to move to public funding of elections. Billionaires, and this is not just Tom Steyer, billionaires should not be able to spend unlimited sums of money trying to buy elections.
The man makes a good point. Medicare for All, a proposal, of course, made popular by Bernie Sanders, remains a defining platform for many of the 2020 Dems. The Vermont senator recently cited plans to close a Pennsylvania hospital as an example of the urgent need for Medicare for All, declaring that, quote, corporate greed is destroying our healthcare system. Joining us to discuss all of this is David Sirota, Bernie Sanders' top advisor and speechwriter. Great to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about what you all just announced this morning, actually, trips to Canada. What's going on there?
So Senator Sanders is going to lead a bus trip to Canada with people who need insulin, diabetics who need insulin, to spotlight the price differential in the United States and in Canada between the price of insulin there and here. And he led these trips 20 years ago from Vermont into Canada to spotlight back then the same kind of differentials, that Americans are paying the highest prices for prescription drugs in the world, as opposed to a place like Canada, which has more restrictions on prices. And the goal of the trip is not only to help these seniors get the drugs that they need, but to spotlight how the pharmaceutical industry is really ripping off Americans with prices that are way out of whack with the prices that are charged to other industrialized nations.
David, something I've been interested in. John Delaney, we had on this show, he said that all the Democratic candidates have basically adopted Bernie's healthcare proposal. I actually kind of agree. I wonder how the campaign feels about the fact that they led on Medicare for All, and is it annoying, I guess, in a way, in order to see everybody else flock to the same ideas?
No, I think it's a vindication. I mean, I think it's like, look, Bernie Sanders has been campaigning for lower price prescription drugs. He's been campaigning for Medicare for All, national health care, for decades at this point. And it is a vindication that the Democratic Party, many members of the Democratic Party, are pushing for some of the same things. Now, the devil is always in the details, right? I mean, there's this thing of Medicare for America, Medicare X. Our campaign is very clear about what we're talking about: a Medicare for All, single-payer system that replaces the private insurance system. It's a very popular program, especially among Democratic voters. I know there's been a debate about that, but I think it's a vindication of the fact that Americans are simply sick and tired of a system that is for profit and ripping them off.
Well, to that point, so on the debate stage, right, all the candidates got asked whether they would do away with private insurance altogether, right? Senator Harris, among many others, raised her hand and said yes, and then after the fact said, I misheard the question, no, I wouldn't do that. What do you make of that first, and then why is it important to get rid of private health insurance altogether?
Well, she said that she'd misheard the question. I mean, I think there's a larger question, whether it's for her or for the other candidates. Are they trying to muddle what Medicare for All really is? I mean, you've seen Joe Biden say, he wants to allow a Medicare buy-in and that represents Medicare for All. Bernie Sanders has been very clear about what Medicare for All really means. It's taking the existing Medicare system and expanding it to cover everyone, period, end of story. To your question about private insurance, the reason that you want a Medicare for All system to replace private insurance for the services that system offers is so that you prevent creating a two-tiered system where the Medicare for All, the public system, is covering people who are the sickest, and that other people go elsewhere. So it's a two-tiered system. You want one system for the services that the Medicare for All system covers. Now, if people want to go get services that the Medicare for All program doesn't cover, private insurance will be allowed and available for that. But the point of our proposal is that the services that will be offered under Medicare for All will be offered for everybody in the country.
And just to clarify, I mean, basically the idea is you need everybody in the same risk pool for the dollars to work, right? Because you can't have the government just paying for the sickest people and just absorbing all of that risk, while the private health insurance industry basically gets to cherry pick the young and the healthy.
Yes, you want everybody in the system. You want everybody having skin in the game in the system. And if you think about the politics of this, right? if everyone in the country has a vested interest in making sure that this system works and is a good system, that builds a big political consensus to make sure that the system is good, it's high quality. I mean, we certainly have the resources in this country to make sure that that happens.
Right.
We're the wealthiest country in the world. But what you want is also that political investment where everybody, rich and poor, from any different geography, is invested in that system.
But David, when I hear Medicare for All, and from these candidates, the ones who oppose it, we hear exactly the same thing. Everybody likes Medicare for All, the idea, but when you have to say, oh, we're going to take your private insurance away, it polls badly. What's your campaign's response to that?
Well, the first thing is that you have to see how the poll was worded. Mm-hmm. If you read people a poll saying Medicare for All, you're going to lose your private insurance, that you get one set of results. But you have to make the positive, or at least the factual argument about Medicare for All as well. When you look at polls that ask, would you support Medicare for All if you get to keep your same health care provider, there's majority support for that. There was a Morning Consult poll, I think it was a week ago, showing that. And that's been a consistent finding. And the point that you get out of that is that people don't love their insurance company. They love their doctor. They love their nurses.
Right.
And so the point here is that what the pharmaceutical and drug industry wants you to believe is that people somehow love the big faceless corporation, the insurance corporation that's ripping you off. What we're saying is that people like their healthcare providers, and that the insurance companies are getting in between patients and their healthcare
But how do you
providers.
keep that promise? Don't forget Obama's fatal words. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. He lost the entire Congress based on that. How can you make sure to keep that promise to Americans?
Because the Medicare for All system will be the central system that finances healthcare.
Doctors will have no choice but to take Medicare for All. It's the only game in town.
Exactly. Yeah. So there, if you want to be a physician, if you want to be a healthcare provider under this system, you will be participating in the Medicare for All system.
What's the reality? By the way, I think the political point you make is a really important and interesting one, because the reason that Social Security and Medicare today are so popular is because everybody is in. The minute that you make something into quote-unquote welfare, it's subject to all sorts of vicious attacks, class-based, racial attacks, etc., as we've seen time and time again throughout history. So I think that's a really important point. What do you say, John Delaney on the stage, and again, we had him on the show yesterday, so we've got John Delaney on the mind, but he makes this argument that hospitals will not be able to make enough money with Medicare for All. They'll all basically close if we go in the direction of Medicare for All. What is the response to that?
Well, first of all, that hasn't happened in countries where there has been a Medicare for All style system. So that's belied by other countries and their system. And the interesting thing is that people like John Delaney seem to be defining American exceptionalism in a negative kind of way. That we somehow are the wealthiest country in the world, but we're the only country in the world that can't do what other industrialized countries have done, which is create a Medicare for All style system. So I think Bernie Sanders rejects that idea. That his idea is that if other countries can do this, the United States can do this. We can provide that universal health care to our people. And the thing is that the other countries that have this, many of them have better health care outcomes, that their population is healthier, that their systems are working better for all people than our system. I mean, our system has high quality for people who can afford it, but there are millions of people who cannot afford the basics.
So Bernie also had a great Twitter thread yesterday about how he welcomes the hatred of many of the billionaire class. And he listed out a few with some photos there.
Echoing FDR there.
Echoing FDR. Seems to have been prompted by Tom Steyer's candidacy. What is it about Bernie in particular that he's the only one that seems to get this exact type of hatred from the billionaire class? I think that's what Tom Steyer said, despite the fact that many other candidates would be no friends to them.
Well, look, I mean, that list of folks who have been who've criticized Bernie, I mean, they are folks with a vested interest in the existing system. They are billionaires and the ones that we listed, I mean, these are, people on Wall Street. These are corporate titans. And I think what they see in Bernie is true. They see somebody who, you have Joe Biden saying there's going to be no fundamental change. You see Bernie Sanders saying, in fact, there's going to be serious fundamental change if I am elected. That the billionaire class is going to have to give up some of its wealth and some of its power so that we can create a government that works for all people and not just the billionaire class.
This corporatist group, Third Way, has even been working with Elizabeth Warren, who I would say is, in a similar progressive lane as Senator Sanders. Why do you think that they find her acceptable, but Senator Sanders like totally out of bounds?
I can only speak for Senator Sanders and our
they called you an existential threat to the Democratic Party.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to Third Way. Third Way is a Wall Street group that wants to preserve a party or a faction of the Democratic Party that works for Wall Street. And Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to that faction of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to Wall Street continuing to rip off Americans as a business model of fraud. But the point is that I think our campaign is arguing that we may be an existential threat to those people and those interests that have created an economy that does not work for all, but we are not a threat. We are a solution. The grassroots movement that we're building is a solution to a problem of a rigged economy.
Yeah.
David Sirota, great to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, David. Next on Rising, online personalities, journalists, think tanks, and advocacy groups are coming together at the White House today for a social media summit.
We're going to dive into that event and some of the controversial figures on the guest list with Blaze TV host Lauren Chen when Rising returns.